Now, in this video, we're going to talk about a debate that has 4 million views between Stevenson, who is a former trader who is about having some kind of more socialist type of government in terms of higher taxes on the rich. And he is debating someone who's a tech entrepreneur, and the tech entrepreneur has a net worth north of $10 million. So it's a very interesting debate between someone who poses a political solution to the economic issues within the West in terms of mobility, eradication of the middle class, people can't afford to buy homes or even buy food and things like that. Now, it's a balance between what is the political solution of providing for a middle class versus the personal solution of how you can take action for yourself to make more money. And it really is maybe the real answer is in between, a balance of the both, maybe lower tax for people who are up and coming entrepreneurs or lower tax for the middle class in terms of their jobs. And then it could be a balance between that and more entrepreneurship, so you can start a side hustle and make money from that without the government taxing you incredibly highly and industries blocking your barrier to entry. So it's an interesting debate between two perspectives. Let's listen to this guy, and this is the trader, by the way, Gary Stevenson. He's quite big on YouTube. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Slashing to zero.
Boom, 0.5%.
Exactly. And everybody, all the economists were like, wow, this is going to cause a massive recovery, because they thought that interest rates were powerful. And everybody predicted that rates would come back up in 2009, which of course we now know they didn't. Then everybody predicted that rates would go up in 2010, which we now know they didn't. And then at the beginning of 2011, everybody was predicting rates will definitely go up this year. And this to me was so interesting because, you know, I'm an economics at one of the best economics universities in the world. And now I'm working with these traders who are getting paid millions of pounds a year to predict the economy, to predict the interest rates. And everybody is wrong year after year. And this was so amazing to me for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's like, this is a big thing that we as a society should understand, and like, we get wrong. But secondly, if all of the best guys in the world are getting this wrong, then if I can figure this out, I can make a ton of money here.
Gary, how much money did you make for Citibank at the age of 24 years old?
That year, 2011, I put this big bet on that it would get worse forever. And I was Citibank's most profitable trader in the world that year. And I made them just over $35 million.
You made them $35 million. You eventually decide to leave Citibank.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, I think it's an interesting question, right? You know, I've just explained to you what happened, which is I made a ton of money by betting on the collapse of Western society. I did it again in 2012. I would prefer it not to collapse, Stephen. And I'm trying to stop it from collapsing. When
you say it collapsing, what exactly are you referring to that you don't want to collapse?
So you born in Dubai?
Yeah.
You still have family there?
I've got family in Nigeria, which is where my family are from. I was born in Botswana because we were visiting there, but
okay.
Got family in Nigeria.
Go to Nigeria much?
No. I've got a home in Cape Town in South Africa, so I see it's a great place if you see inequality.
I think there is a naivety in this country, in places like this, that the kind of inequality, the kind of broad poverty that you see in places like South Africa, in places like Nigeria, in places like India, can't happen here. It will happen here. That is the future of this country. That is the future of the US. And I'm not just saying that, I'm betting on it. And I've been betting on it for 15 years, and I've been right for 15 years. That is what I'm trying to avoid.
So before we continue, this Gary Stevenson guy, he worked at Citigroup. He made $35 million for them in 1 year. And he worked there for several years, making in terms of his salary. Then he moved on to start his YouTube channel and have this kind of informal political movement to cause social change for a greater wealth tax on the rich. I don't want to say everyone who's a popular influencer is a glowy. They're controlled opposition. They're working for the authorities, you know, they're undercover feds playing characters to push. I just think it's slightly suspicious sometimes when I see some of these people pushing different talking points. Now, that's one thing I would say. First thing I would say, he also mentioned interest rate predictions. So if you weren't aware, when it comes to trading interest rate products, any products that is dependent somewhat on interest rate, you have to make predictions whether you think interest rates will go up or down, right? And he mentioned how a lot of these banks were giving out incorrect predictions about what direction interest rates would head in. Now, the thing is, a lot of these banks are lying, right? And they lie publicly. They lie on public, mislead you. For example, behind the scenes, they could be massively increasing their position in Bitcoin. Meanwhile, they go on public news platforms, CNBC, CNN, Bloomberg, whichever news you'd watch. And they're, oh, well, actually, Bloomberg is a scam. Bitcoin is a scam. And we want you buying Bitcoin. Bitcoin's all about. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, they're pushing the price down publicly by convincing normies and masses not to get involved in it or have a bad perception of it. Meanwhile, they're buying a lot of it at lower costs. They're lowering the price of Bitcoin, and then they reverse that. They can put out the opposite propaganda while they're shorting the market, and then you're investing a lot and then they crash the market. They do this with everything. They do it with gold, silver, commodities. They do it with the equity market. You can just go and look this up. You can look at JP Morgan and the rigging of the silver market. It's kind of a common thing. They pay a small fine, continue the same kind of rigging of the silver market, allegedly, of course, accidentally, of course. You know, there's always one bad guy fire, but then the same pattern of behavior continues again and again. And then, unfortunately, they just had one rogue trader. It's not the entire bank doing it, you know. And then they pay a few $100 million a fine. Meanwhile, they're making billions and billions, right? And then they just make a sorry-ass excuse for it. So the point is, you know, you should be careful about what... Sometimes the thing to do is the opposite of what you're being told, right? Same thing when it comes to maybe pursuing a stable 9-to-5 career for the rest of your life. Playing it safe and following the rules doesn't always work. Same way a lot of the media propaganda you've seen since 2020 has been a complete lie. Now, he mentions, you know, he is making bets, he's making financial positions on the basis that the West is collapsing or will collapse. And you should do the same thing. You should position yourself accordingly. A good example of this, which doesn't involve trading, is some people are becoming mental health therapists. Now, that might not sound like the most exciting job, but as the economy gets worse and more of it gets blamed on mental health, and everyone's got a mental health issue, they need medication for it, they have anxiety issues, depression, blah, blah. It's real. I'm not saying not all made up. But a mental health therapist can make a lot of money through basically living through this time period, right? And becoming a mental health professional, because so many people are looking for therapy. So many people are dealing with real issues because they can't progress in their life. They're going to be stuck for the rest of their life with very little life progression. And what's going to end up happening is the mental health therapists are going to make a killing, right? I know mental health therapists that charge like $150 to $250 an hour, and many people work in professions like banking, finance, law, and they pay for this because they're unhappy in their life and they're looking for maybe some type of mental health solution. And then there's people at other ends, lower income levels, who go for therapists, right? You've seen the popularity of BetterHelp and all these online mental health platforms, but that's a way of, from the collapse of the West, right or wrong, mental health therapists are going to make a lot of money. There's also often the joke that people make online that, you know, there's going to be a lot of single. Morgan Stanley statistics, 45% of women in the West are going to be single by 2030. So this, how could you make money from that? The joke people make is, invest in the companies that are making cat food, because lots of single women are going to buy cats, or they're going to drinking a lot of wine. So you might have lots of people investing in cat food and wine because they're going to be a lot of single women. But there's lots of other things, right? For example, I think one big business opportunity for many people, well, for some people who have the skills, would be indie game production, which would be independent game. I see lots of complaints within the gaming sphere with some people saying, these these console releases are too expensive, they're too expensive, they're not good. So there will be indie game developers who could make a lot of money through making their own games, selling them on Steam Store and different platforms there. And there's also going to be a lot of single men. And what will single men do? They'll do some more things like martial arts. They might go on hiking trips. So there's little small business opportunities there. When you observe the societal trends changing, right? The more obvious thing is to focus on developing online skills, right? Marketable skills for self-employment. So you can be location independent. We have digital nomads that are moving abroad and living overseas. And that could be the best alternative. You know, recently I got a comment on my chat. Someone said, here's a short of house in London, and it was a small 3-bedroomed terraced house. It was like it was completely broken down inside. You have to refurbish everything. It looked like it had damp on the walls. You'd probably spend, 10 to 50,000 renovating it, on top of the $1 million price tag, because where it was located was a prime location, even though the house was in really bad condition. And it wasn't even a super big house. That's one of the funniest things about London, or essentially houses outside the US in America. You should be grateful. You typically have everything is big houses. Even your apartments are much bigger. I've worked in New York previously, and some of them are a lot bigger compared to London, right? In London, everything's smaller, but it's like really high price too. So it's like you're getting a small 3-bedroom house and it's like over $1 million. Completely ridiculous. Now, the point is, the point I'm trying to make here is that political solution and a personal solution, right? You can do your best to improve your situation. And you can dedicate maybe 5% of your time or less to political solutions. I don't recommend you go out there and protest. It's not really safe on the streets these days. And also you've got, these political movements trying to use you and waste your time. When I saw people, right, at the Republican National Convention or the Democrat National Convention, whether you like Trump or you like Kamala Harris or whoever, Joe Biden, Vance, whoever, the point is that these guys, right, they have their own agendas. They got billionaires that they answer. They got their own donors and their own lobbyists that they answer to, right? How much of your time do you want to dedicate to political solutions? So you can't really worry about what the masses are. It's what works for you. And most people out there, you have some very niche skill that you can lean into that really can help develop a better solution for yourself rather than simply complaining and protesting. Find a solution for yourself, because only the strong and the smart are going to really survive and do well in the next 5 to 10 years. Many people are going to be dealing with very difficult financial circumstances. So let's listen to the next clip here.
And any of that stuff that operates online, they tend to actually do pretty well after the pandemic.
Can I ask you a question?
Go for it.
Do you think the average American, Australian, wherever the person out there is watching, if they quit their job and go work in tech, do you think they'll be able to get financial security relatively easily?
Depends when you define financial security. The issue with house prices.
The ability to raise a family, have a home.
Yeah. So having a home is a big issue, right? So here's what I see with houses. Because houses, my dad bought a house for $18,000, which is about £10,000 or less than £10,000, and it's probably worth over $1 million today. So something went on, and this, by the way, UK specific. The countries had house prices go through the roof. If you go to Norway or Sweden, their house prices grew by 600%.
It's happening everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's not specific to anywhere. It's happening everywhere.
But what has definitely happened in the UK is actually a housing traffic jam. So in this country, in the UK, we have 9.5 million homes that have 2 or more spare bedrooms. Big family homes have 2 or more spare bedrooms. And when you look into who owns those houses, 78% of housing wealth is baby boomers. And now, anecdotally, I take my kids trick-or-treating and we go down a street that is big family homes, and you go knock on the doors, and it's all people over 65, right? And they're living in a big family home with empty spare bedrooms.
You think the average American over 65 is living luxuriously?
The over 65, so more than half of the US economy is in the hands of baby boomers, right? So they own all the houses. The houses got bought up cheap. Baby boomers still own those houses to this day. The big family homes with multiple spare bedrooms are empty. And now that creates this traffic jam where people my age,
they all own property. All 4 of them died with nothing. That wealth which they had in property was used in equity release schemes. It was used in paying through their retirement. It was used in life care. Do you think when those old people die, young people today will be rich?
There is half the economy held by baby boomers. It's either going to be passed down or passed into the aged care industry or passed.
Okay, sure. So I just want to continue with this. There's obviously an issue that everyone's going to face, which will be house, with housing being overpriced. And it's true what he's saying here about housing being overpriced in the and outside the West, right? I've been to countries like Albania, countries like Colombia, and many of the locals can't afford to buy a house, and they live with their parents until, they're maybe their mid-30s in some cases, right? Or even older. And then they have to buy small apartments because all these major where the jobs are only selling affordable apartments. Everything else is kind of houses that are very overpriced. Now, I always warn you, avoid avoid massive mortgages, avoid miserable, careful about the decisions. And what's funny here, there's a phrase you might have heard before called day of the pillow, or the boomer cost. Essentially what happens is, some people are saying millennials and Gen Z are just waiting for their parents to pass away, or they're going to end their parents with a pillow over their head, which is kind of dark humor. But the suggestion there is that they realize Gen Z and they can't progress their life. They're waiting to live their life in a very low-key lifestyle until their parents way, and they can inherit a house to live in, or inherit whatever investments their parents have, whatever savings they have, because how hard they work, they're not going to make it too far in their kind of career path. So it's kind of a dark reality. But when you have house prices that are going to be high, as long as you have baby boomers here, you have mass migration, which is going to artificially prop up property prices too, because there's so many people, more people than there are apartments to live in, and governments give housing to those migrants. So that's creating an issue too. You mentioned 78% of housing wealth is with the baby boomers. So it's interesting what's going to happen, because some of that, like you said, people are going to spend, the older people are going to spend in their retirement. A large part of that will go to the millennials in the next 5 to 10 years as the boomers pass away. So it's no wonder that, many millennials and Gen Z kind of lack agency, right? There's a sense of hopelessness, right? And you avoid it. People are like, well, I've got nothing to live for, right? They don't have wealth, they don't have ability or stability to move forward. And it's a very difficult reality. So let's listen to what they have to say here about changes throughout the generations.
That she was born in.
I agree. You and I agree on the problem. You keep bringing back to the problem.
I keep bringing it back to people, because the people who watch, we're millionaires, okay? The people who watch us are mostly not millionaires. Is life going to get better for them?
The life will get better if you are connected to the most productive parts of the economy. If you pretend that it's 1955 and you recreate the post-war era conditions, if you try to go back to 1955, I don't think that's going to work.
So let me ask on that then, the point about if you're the most productive parts of the economy. I was quite surprised when I was doing some research on this. There's quite big differences between the UK and the US in terms of GDP growth. In Q4 2024, the US economy grew by 0.6%, while the UK growth was 0.1%. So they're doing significantly better in that regard. US GDP per head stands at $82,000 per head, whereas the UK stands at $49,000 per head. And stock market performance, which is an indication of, I guess, whatever, rose by 300% in the US, whereas the FTSE 100 declined by 20%, which is the UK stock market. Productivity growth since 2018, productivity increased by 30% in the United States, which has outpaced the UK. And lastly, income growth. Since 2007, American income per head has increased by 72%, while it has decreased by 2% in the UK in dollar terms. So they seem to be doing better if you just look at the economy. Why is that? Is that because they lean more into technology and to innovation and entrepreneurship? And is it because of the things you were saying earlier about their attitude towards the government, like reduce government spending versus tax the rich? Why? I'm keen to hear Gary's view on this, because I know because you've just said it.
Yeah, I think these are great statistics. And of course, the US has a strong reputation for being free markets and being very state. In the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, we've had a UK government that has been aggressively slashing the state. And the US...
state's bigger than ever. It's 45% of the economy.
And the US, we had a government in the last 4 years which has been running a massive, massive deficit. So in that period of time, it appears the government, which has been aggressively increasing deficit, has massively overperformed the government, which has been aggressively slashing the state. That's what it looks to be from the last. I mean, Joe Biden enormously increased the deficit, enormously. And the Conservatives were austerity government for 14 years. Service has been slashed.
Let me zoom out a little.
Do you think the police spending's been slashed?
Oh, police spending is definitely.
Do you think education spending's been?
You know where it ends up? It ends up with like big corporates, big consulting, who get paid $50 million to produce a report to tell government something. All of the, I won't name names, but all the big consulting firms, they're all bloodsuckers to government. They know that the money's in the government, and they set up business models to extract that money from government. And it also is in the financial trading side of things. One of the issues that we've got, right, and this is a big issue as well, because you care about wealth inequality. One of the biggest issues I see, during the pandemic, we all learned to work remotely, and remote work became the norm. And what I see at the moment is huge amounts of what would have been normal jobs are going to the Philippines, going to India, going to Vietnam, people who work remotely now. We now have 1,000 millionaires a month leaving to go to Dubai. We have 120,000 British people living in Dubai in that economy. The world's become incredibly mobile. And one of the things that's happening is that previously been good British jobs are getting moved overseas to lower cost countries. And that's technology that drives that wedge. The US is smart in that they've built a technology powerhouse, and the UK has completely lost our technology industry. Our tech industry is in decline, same across Europe. China and the US know that the game is tech, and they're basically pulling all the tech company into their borders. And what's happening a lot is the erosion of good jobs and of normal, well-paying jobs because they're going. And it's a bit of a self-loop that the more we millionaires, the burden falls on everyone else, so they put the taxes up, and then the millionaires say, oh, the taxes are too high, so they leave. I've watched some of the most incredible entrepreneurs that you would want here that would employ your sister at a high rate, and they've picked up and left because the taxes are too high.
So are you saying we should tax people less?
Well, the overall government has to be smaller.
So there you have it, right? He's making a good point here. What is he trying to explain? He's trying to say that, listen, it's not the 1955, and I always say, it's not the 1950s in terms of relationships between men and women or the economy, right? We're not living in this stable environment. We don't have, in some senses, the economic freedom we had before or a fair social contract. It wasn't like you pay a fair amount of taxes and you get a fair, decent amount of government services. You see how it looks like you're living in a third world country in many parts of the UK or the US or in the West in general. It's best to stop pretending and stop fooling yourself, right? The UK, in many ways, in many parts of the West, is a bit like a sinking ship, right? I think the US will do better and they'll see some wage growth over time there. But the UK is literally being overtaxed and censored. They're driving away a lot of good business. And many of their own citizens, like you mentioned here, are leaving. Millionaires and things like that are leaving from the UK to move to Dubai, other business-friendly environments, right? In many ways, the country's finished, a bit like you see with Canada and things like that. And what he's making here, the point he's making, this tech entrepreneur here, is worth over $10 million. So he kind of does know what he's talking about to a certain extent, we could say, right? He's saying, you align yourself with what's the growing area of the economy or your industry. In this case, he's made money online, so he's talking about the digital economy. But it's also other growth areas. I mentioned healthcare, due to an aging population, that's going to be in higher demand. There's areas of tech, AI, of course, single economy, that's what I call it, right? It's not a family economy anymore. You need to position yourself to win in the growing areas. Government and corporations are wasting your time, wasting your money, and destroying your future. And there's a popular case that's out there right now where Accenture, which is a major consulting firm, was working with the London government, right, with the Transport for London. Then Accenture removed their DEI policy due to, I think, Trump and the other type of movements there going on in the US. And then the Transport for London refused to work with Accenture because they removed the DEI policies. So it's really kind of interesting, the different perspectives that are going on there. But it just goes to show, and I know this, you see this, I've worked in the industry and finance, a lot of the consulting firms, they're making tens of millions of dollars through government contracts and not actually doing a lot of work. It's like writing and research and things like that. And you're going to continually have this collaboration between corporations and government to make your life worse. It could be higher taxes, it could be mass migration, it could be lower work quality, it could be a lack of payroll. So you've also always got to do your best to kind of think for yourself, setting yourself up to win through skills. Because if you think about the web collapsing, like a sinking ship like the Titanic, you have to build your own lifeboat, your own life raft, right? Like if you imagine the Titanic sinking, you're jumping off the Titanic, which would be the West. What is your life raft? What are you going to cling on to? What life raft are you going to build out of sticks of bamboo or an inflatable dinghy in terms of a lifeboat? What is that going to be based on? The only thing that's going to carry you through the next 5 to 10 years will be your skill set, your network, and your brand, which could be simply a LinkedIn profile. Those are the only things that are going to set yourself up to win. You want to build your skills to be mobile and go after opportunities and money. For example, I know several cases going back to my time at Goldman Sachs whereby lawyers would be moving from major investment banks like Goldman Sachs to work at other finance firms within Dubai or United Arab Emirates for much lower taxes and much better quality of life. Now, if you build a good skill set where you can be in demand or move anywhere to low cost of living locations or low tax locations and really live a good life for yourself. Many people are not thinking that way, right? You can't really dedicate that much time to a political solution, in my opinion. You have to really think about what could work for you.
You know what?
About his
Let's support it.
situation.
Let's have a tax system where your kids and my kids and Steven's kids are multimillionaires, and these guys out there can't afford to feed their kids and put the heat in.
That's not what I'm saying.
But that's what you will get.
That's not what I'm saying.
That is what you will get. Listen, that's what I'm betting on. That's fine, because I'll make money in the markets. It's fine. And you'll make money. It's our viewers who will be poor, and that's fine.
Well, let's explore the other alternative, right? So let's say tax the rich, right? Yeah. So let's play the game of tax the rich.
Tax the owners, not the workers.
Yeah, so
the owners.
So the issue that we have with the rich is that the number one most valuable assets in the economy now are intangible assets. So there's this chart called the S&P 500 of the 500 richest countries in the world, in the US, sorry. In 75% of the value of the S&P 500 was physical assets like property. and it's less than 10%. It's 5%.
So you think that housing is not particularly important?
Just stick with what I'm saying.
Okay.
The engine room of the economy is digital assets, and that's reflected in the S500, for example, which is 95% intangible assets. One of the issues that we have is that the richest people are completely mobile now. So they can be absolutely anywhere in the world. So if you come up with this idea of let's tax richest people 1%, if a tiny proportion of them leave, we're all in trouble. So
these really rich guys, what do they own?
Companies.
And why are those companies worth money?
Because investors say they are.
And where do the revenues come from?
Globally.
Okay.
The issue is that these companies operate globally now.
So if I'm a billionaire...
Take my company, for example.
Yeah.
Mike has 8,000 customers in 150 countries.
Okay.
We could be anywhere. If you push a button...
What country is your biggest single revenue source?
Probably the US now.
Let's say you move to Cayman Islands and the US says we're going to tax your revenue at point of sale. What could you do?
Well, that's different, right? Because that's not taxing billionaires, that's taxing companies. See, when you say tax the rich on their wealth, that's just saying tax companies a consumption tax.
Oh, but you just said the rich own companies. You said that's what they own.
Yeah, but how do you tax them, right? So do you tax their wealth, which is what they own, or do you tax the companies where they trade? Typically, taxes get passed on to consumers.
Oh, it's not a consumption tax. It's the tax on the ownership.
Yeah, but you simply say when you're doing revenues, then that's a consumption tax.
If we start to tax,
and by the way, I'm not exactly against you on. I think it's disgusting that a British company can a Facebook ad to sell to a British consumer a British product, and Facebook pretends to be in Ireland on that transaction, and can buy something on Amazon in Britain from a British supplier from a British warehouse, and Amazon pretends to be in Luxembourg in that situation, and that sucks, right? Like that doesn't seem fair, and it strikes me as very strange that the government is okay with that. Right now, the government is chasing down mums and dads who sell a few things on eBay and them for taxes, but they don't talk to eBay. They're about someone doing a little bit of a side hustle on Facebook, but Facebook's fine to pretend to be in Ireland. So I don't agree with all of that, right? Like we're some serious tricks here. But the idea with taxing billionaires at wealth, billionaires will just leave. They just get up and leave. And not billionaires.
But what do billionaires own?
Companies.
And where do companies get their money from?
Revenues.
And where do the revenues come from?
Purchasing.
Those people live?
All over the world.
We can tax them at that point.
Well, that's consumption tax.
This is the thing.
That's a consumption tax.
No, it's not. It's a tax on
VAT is a tax on revenues.
These guys on profits based on where the revenues come from.
So it's very easy to move profits internationally. See, Stephen had a Starbucks cup. When he buys that Starbucks, it's from a British company who the Starbucks logo from somewhere like that. So 15%. So here we are saying, we're going to tax their profits. They say, we were profitable. Sorry. Unfortunately, we had to do that licensing deal with that international corporation.
I know profit shifting works. Okay, so are you telling me a company is selling to the US, enormous amount of profit in the US, and they turn around and say, actually, our profit's not in the US. You think the US is incapable of going and looking if that's seeing where the profit is?
I'm not saying that you can't do this. I'm saying that the benefits of doing it, it's so hard to tax wealth, for example, or it's so hard to tax millionaires and billionaires that you end up cutting off your nose to spite your face. Like if we create Britain, for example, and we build a brand which is that we're anti-wealth, we don't want you to ever have more than 10 million. If you've got more than 10 million, we punish you. Every young entrepreneur who comes to me and says, Dan, do you think I should start a company here in this country? I'm going to say, well, if you do, they'll take it. As soon as you start to make it, they'll take it. If you're successful, if you get investment, they're going to tax you your wealth. If you sell the company, they're going to take it off you. I'm going to basically say to that young entrepreneur, don't build your business in Britain. Go start it somewhere that they're more proactive and positive towards entrepreneurs.
Are we seeing that now with this, they call it the Millionaire Exodus, which is, for people that don't know, the UK is set to lose the greatest proportion of millionaires in the world this parliament. I'll put a graph on the screen, which is this one here. That little red line here is us losing all of our millionaires at the moment. And in 2024, it's estimated that 10,800 high net worth individuals left the UK, which is a 157% increase from the previous year, which means that one millionaire is departing every 45 minutes. The UK Millionaire Exodus is equal to losing 530,000 average taxpayers. And another stat The top 10% of earners in the US account for nearly half of all consumer spending. The top 1% of income taxpayers in the UK are projected to contribute about 30% of total income tax from 2024 to 2025. Why are all these millionaires running away?
Well, it's not because they're taxing their wealth, because we don't have any wealth taxes.
Why do you think they're leaving?
I think the reason they're leaving is because the UK economy is really, really weak. Because the UK consumer is really, really weak. Because you absolutely crushed the spending power of your average British family.
And where are they
going? Your average
going?
British family can barely afford to feed the kids and turn the heating on. So why are you going to start a business here when the customers are absolutely impoverished?
Look, it corresponds with a new tax that we brought in, which was we ended the non-dom scheme. So the non-dom scheme basically said if you're living in the UK, but you've got businesses all over the world, then we only tax you on what you've got in the UK. And if you're in the UK, we'll only tax you on your UK assets for inheritance tax if you're a non-dom. But if you're in the UK and you've got wealth in India, that non-dom scheme ended. They basically said, we will tax you on everything globally. If you're if you're a tax resident in the UK, everything you've got globally, we want 40% of it. So unfortunately, every wealth manager contacted their clients and said, you can't stay here. You're going to have to get out. It's gotten 1,000 people a month are leaving, and in the UK, 1% of people pay 30% of the taxes, 10% of people pay 60% of the taxes. And you imagine if we're sitting out at dinner and there's 10 of us out for dinner and one person says, hey, I've got this, I'll get this bill tonight. We say to them, no, it should be 70%. They say, you know what, I'll get up and leave. So they leave, everyone else's bill just doubled. So what's going to happen is if we drive the millionaires out of this country, every ordinary normal who pays 10 grand a year in tax will now have to pay 20 grand a year in tax.
So the reason they left it because we used to allow them to not pay tax.
See, I just wanted to include that to show, you can have pointless back and forth about what do you think that tax should be. Like, I mean, the system is for, let's just say, the people who kind of run it, friends, basically, whoever that would be. And what should be everyone at now, making being a millionaire is a good thing, and is no small amount of money, of course. But the millionaires aren't necessarily, who these looking out for. I would say if you're 100 million and above, billionaire type of level, that's when you're kind of in the inner of who the system's really looking out for. You're on part of the deep state, whatever you want to call it. But many people who are just millionaires, they're not like the super rich, right? They're just people who might have had a successful business, they own a few properties, things like that. A millionaire definitely isn't what it used to be. Now, this is a very funny graph, right? Because you could see all these other places that have attracted millionaires compared to the UK, who's had a 20% decline of millionaires, right? So let's look at some of these. So you've got Taiwan, Japan. Japan has pricey places to live. They are expensive, but they do have quality living, low crime, very civilized countries. You have places like Brazil and Mexico, which are kind of interesting. They're attracting millionaires. Maybe they're the passport bros. Maybe they're people who want good quality weather, relatively low cost of living, and just a better vibe rather than the negative division type of environment West and the messed up gender dynamics we have in the West, right? You've got other countries like some of these are developing, right? You've got things like South Africa, you've got India, and you've got other countries like Switzerland, which is known for having, private banking, lots of rich people, money in countries like Switzerland. Even Italy has high quality of life. Italy, Spain, if you're rich. I know many people who've made significant amounts of money through crypto, through online businesses. They moved to Spain. I think particularly there might be tax benefits there if you are coming from the US. So I think this country or this system has been deliberately broken, right? And you just have to plan for your own sake what you can do to make the best life you can. And before you make any big decisions like buying a big house or paying for an expensive wedding, think about how you can make a fulfilling life for yourself, and then from there, from step by step, and build a life that actually works for you. Think about how you can fix your situation, not depending or worrying about the political situation that's kind of out of your control. Even sure, we all would like to fix things as best we can. Now, this reminds me of a particular lesson in my career code course. Think like a worker. You rise through tactics, not tasks. Focus on timing, influence, positioning to pursue power. Now, people might read this and go, oh, this is about office politics, right? But this also applies within your society where you're living, right? The country you're living. You got to think like a strategist. Don't be just like a meaningless worker. Many people are going through the cycle: work, consume, work 8 hours, go to sleep, and then work, consume, right? Buy this. I need to work hard so I can buy a Rolex. I need to work hard so I can buy the new Tesla car. Things like that. You really need to think about what lifestyle you want. And that's why timing matters. Timing of job hopping, timing of maybe moving to work abroad, the influence you have in your industry, your networking, positioning there, skills you're developing, being strategic with your life, right? Because some people, they want to move abroad, right? They want to think about what skills they can have online. These are things I help with through career coaching. And you might want to make money online, be a freelancer, move to countries like Brazil or Mexico. You might want to think about opportunities like that. And all of that is about being a strategist, not about being a worker. For example, I'll give you a good example here. I know 2 people who are therapists, mental health therapists. One of them just getting recommendations through accredited psychiatrists and other psychologists. So they get references and they get paid through medical insurance companies and they make a decent salary. But then I know another mental health specialist who is less qualified, who didn't pay for all those expensive PhDs and in psychology and things like that, but they have a decent brand on Instagram, right? They talk about mental health. They have some minor professional certifications in therapy, right? And they're making a lot more. They're popular online and they're making some good points. I don't agree with everything they say, but the point is they found a loophole there. Like, why would I go and bought a PhD that costs like 50 grand when I could simply work hard to build it and then track clients through that to build my coaching, to build my therapy. These are the different type of things. I've seen many cases like that on Twitter: nutrition coaches, fitness coaches, people who focus on natural remedies to health issues, who just build like 60,000 followers on Twitter and got a steady stream of clients. The point I'm making there is, they thought strategically. Let me go straight. Let me do D2C, right? Let me do B2C, which would be business direct to client. Let me go and reach out to people who actually want my help, not just some corporation that will help me, right? The whole point is they were thinking strategically and they were not acting like a worker, like a meaningless person who's like, okay, what's the average rate for a male therapist? What? $80 an hour, I'll just accept that. They thought strategically. And that's the difference between the winners and the losers in this system. Now, I have 10 years experience at major corporations like Goldman and Morgan Stanley. I offer career coaching to help you take control of your career and build power, pay, and freedom and not get caught up worrying about politics all the time, right? I help you get promoted, secure top job offers, and master office politics and win big in your corporate job and your corporate career. I also have a course on outsmarting office politics and a mailbox money newsletter, free emails from myself twice a week, Monday and Friday, to help you with your career. So you can just sign up for that. The link's in description. And let me know what you think about this, right? What do you think about Gary Stevenson? I've noticed some of the comments, you seem to like him. Some of these guys, some commenters tend to like Gary. I'm not so sure about him, but let me know what you think in comments. 2 recommended videos on the screen right now, and I'll see you next time.